You will accuse me of shameless snobbery if I now tell you about the prince, whose name was Count Lingen, the prince with whom we were interned. The prince was the grandson of the Kaiser. He was the youngest son of the crown prince, the grandson of the Kaiser Wilhelm II, grandson of Queen Victoria, had been the top man in Germany since 1888. We are now talking about 1940. And he was born in 1959, so you can figure out how old he was. But that's the Kaiser. And his youngest grandson, the youngest son of the crown prince, was a man in his late 20s, and he was interned with us in Cambridge. And he was a nice man. He was not a Nazi. Some of his brothers and uncles were Nazis. He was not. He was not a Nazi. He wasn't a strong anti-Nazi, was not very political, but he was above all a decent man, thoroughly likable, and very nice looking, and behaved like a prince. He was polite and to everyone. Not the slightest suggestion of anti-Semitism or making any distinction between Jews and non-Jews. He was nice to everyone. He behaved according to the highest traditions of the nobility, the way they should behave, and he did. I have nothing critical to say about him, except maybe he wasn't terribly bright. But so are most people. He was just average. Some people who played bridge with him thought he was an abominably bad bridge player, but that's forgivable. That's not a crime. In fact, I have nothing bad to say about him. I have only good things to say about him. For example, that on the Ettrick, the ship which brought us to Canada, the horror ship, where we all had dysentery, he led the latrine brigade to clean up the mess. We all had dysentery, and it is, if you've ever had it, a very messy disease. And the really dirty work was done by His Royal Highness, His Imperial Highness, the Prince, who had recruited 2 or 3 others who were willing to help him. And by doing this heroic work, he earned the respect and gratitude of all of us. So when it came time to elect a leader of our camp in Quebec, there was no question that we would elect him, because he had established leadership qualities beyond any human doubt on the ship, and it was also a very good idea, because we knew, it wasn't very hard to guess, that the Canadian military would treat him with the greatest respect. In fact, when he met as a leader of our camp, when he met the commandant, Piggy Wiggy, it was not clear who should salute him whom, because the former coal merchant in Quebec City had never been in touch with royal blood before. There was a great advantage to us. It was very opportunistic on our part to have him as our leader, especially since we knew, or it was quickly discovered, that the Governor-General and his wife, who resided during the summer in the citadel which was around the corner from our camp, that Princess Alice, the wife of the Governor-General, the Duke of Athlone, was our prince's aunt. And they knew each other well. And some contact was made through Piggy Wiggy, it was rumored that he was allowed out one afternoon to have tea with his aunt. And it was also said, I can't swear that is true, that the Governor General sent a football to our camp, with which we played, not I, but others, with great enthusiasm, and it was rumored that the football had little crowns on it, so to make it particularly delectable. So that was a very useful connection. I know a little bit of what happened to the prince after his return to England. Very tragic, very sad. He was in England. He was afraid that that Churchill would extradite him to the Germans in return for prisoners or something. But this did not happen. He became a country gardener, an estate outside London, where he had a kind of a model farm. He married a member of the Guinness family, Lord Ivy, daughter, very well endowed. They had several children, but it wasn't a good marriage. And in the middle 60s, they were going to be divorced, but rather than that, he went back to Germany, where he had estates, vineyards on the Rhine, and he drowned himself in the Rhine around 1968. Very tragic. Okay. May I tell one more story? In the camp, without any further digression. There was a young man who was singularly good-looking, Viennese. His name was Schoenberg, I think, something like that, Schoenfeld. And the camp was near the way, a kind of detour, to a convent school. And there was a girl called Catherine, I think, or something, who made eye contact with this beautiful boy on her way to the convent. And contact was established between the two, partly through the corrupt guards. This was very illegal. And this was in the summer. This was a little later, but let's not confuse you with dates. He was allowed to spend a weekend in the family home of this distinguished family in Quebec. The grandfather of Catherine was a senator in Ottawa. He was not there. He was a friend of Mackenzie King, and that is through the connection somehow. He was allowed out. And it was very, very exciting for him, of course, and it was very exciting for the girl, no doubt. And it was very, very, very hugely exciting for 800 people who kind of vicariously spent that weekend with him in our minds, and Catherine. And it was very surprising. That family was most hospitable. They spoiled him for a weekend. He went on a shopping trip. And the first evening, he was allowed alone with the girl for an hour or two, and they necked. And then this was Friday night, Saturday night, they went shopping. He bought himself a suit, or rather they gave him a suit. And on Sunday, by 10 o'clock in the evening, but they had given his word of honor, he would be back in the camp. And there we were, all of us, welcoming him home after that exciting weekend. And we demanded to tell us all about it. How would it go? What did it go? How did it go? How did it go? And he told us that they spent time together with the girl, and then on Sunday morning, he had a room by himself, but on Sunday morning, the door opened, and the girl walked in a negligee, and she lay down with him on the bed. And there were 800 of us saying, oh, yeah, well, what happened? Tell us. But he said, one doesn't do it with a child. That was his line. And he was a nice man, and I believe him. And I knew him quite well. I didn't know him very well at the time, but later on I got to know him quite well. And he visited the family. A few weeks, he was in Montreal after his release, and he visited the family in Quebec, and they were very polite with him, they were very nice with him, they were well-behaved people. But Catherine had lost all interest in him. It was only exciting while he was a prisoner, incarcerated. That was very exciting, and after that, it was of no more interest, and they never saw each other again, and that is the end of my story.